Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. PlayStation just made a surprising and maybe a little confusing addition to their first party lineup, and I've got some thoughts about it, so let's get into it. So yeah, if you didn't hear, 3 or probably 4 days ago by the time this video actually is uploaded, PlayStation acquired the Destiny developers Bungie for $3.6 billion, making it about half the price that Xbox paid to get all of Bethesda a few years ago. And what's weirder than the seemingly very high price tag for a single studio is the fact that they've already come out and announced that despite becoming a first-party developer for PlayStation, they will remain an independent publisher who produces all forthcoming games multi-platform, including Xbox. And in case you think that I'm making that up, Jim Ryan was directly quoted as saying, quote, "I want to be very clear to the community that Bungie will remain an independent and multi-platform studio and publisher," which I would say is pretty direct, not a whole lot of wiggle room in there. It just kind of feels like a weird situation. I do very much understand why PlayStation would want to make this deal. It's very beneficial to them, and we'll get into that later. But before we do, I want to talk about what PlayStation actually gets as a part of this acquisition. So obviously, with the purchase of Bungie, you get the Destiny IP, which by itself is a pretty big deal. It's a very popular MMO, although it doesn't necessarily feel like an MMO. It's massive. It's, I think, probably one of the bigger MMOs on console. I've never gotten into it myself, but that IP by itself is a big deal, which is a good thing because it's the only IP I think that you get as a part of this deal. You might also get the Oni IP, although I don't know if anyone remembers that game. It was an old PS2 game that was kind of like a ripoff of Ghost in the Shell, but I couldn't find out definitively who owns that IP because it was published by Take-Two, so they might own it, or also Microsoft might still own it because they took the Halo IP when Bungie left Microsoft, so they may have taken other IP as well. And the only other game that Bungie has ever made with any level of like recognizability was Marathon, but I really don't think there's a whole lot of cachet there. So really, the primary thing that you're getting is the Destiny IP. The other major thing that you're getting is 900 employees. Now, in previous videos where I've talked about acquisitions like this, I don't necessarily think that I've mentioned the number of employees. And the reason for that is why I'm choosing to mention it now is because that $3.6 billion that was paid to acquire Bungie, of that, $1.2 billion was intended to be used as an employee retention program, which is smart. You know, if you buy a studio, you want to keep the people who made the thing that you're buying, right? But again, it feels like a really big overpayment, because if you do the math on that, 1.2 billion divided by 900 employees means that that employee retention program is enough to potentially give every single Bungie employee $1.3 million, which is especially strange when you consider that I can't think of any reason why they would want to leave. You know, Sony is a very well-trusted publisher. They're very well-liked, and they're not even going to necessarily have to change the way that they make games, because they're still an independent publisher with the ability to put their games on whatever platform they want. So I don't know that this incentive program was necessary, and it definitely wasn't necessary to be able to give every single employee over $1 million. Which is not to say that I think that this is a bad deal for PlayStation at all, right? Like, it makes perfect sense why PlayStation would want Bungie, because, first of all, they're a fantastic development team. They make basically nothing but good games since as long as I have known Bungie to exist. And it makes a ton of sense, especially when you look at the recent acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Xbox, because it does kind of feel like PlayStation is getting boxed out of the first-person shooter market, with Xbox owning, Overwatch and Halo and Call of Duty and basically every major first-person shooter except Battlefield, which is owned by EA, and Destiny, which is now owned by PlayStation. So it makes a lot of sense for them to want to make a play to keep one of the bigger first-person shooters on their platform for the foreseeable future, even if they are wanting to keep it on other platforms as well. It also makes sense with a lot of the information that's come out after the fact. Like in the same day, PlayStation announced that they want to put out 10 live service games over the next 5 years, which makes a lot of sense as to why they would want Bungie, because obviously Bungie is a very successful maker of a live service game. Take it or leave it. I know there's some people who are not happy with the way Destiny is monetized. It's highly successful. It makes a ton of money, and so that is a knowledge base that they'll be able to help out with these other live service games. Now, is it strange that they want to put out 10 live service games in the next 5 years? A little bit, considering that we're talking about PlayStation, and that would mean that they would be putting out 2 live service games every year for the next 5 years. And last year they only put out 2 first-party games, and this year they're set to put out 3 first-party games, which would mean that they would either need to double their output of games or have basically all of their first-party games be live services, which seems highly unlikely. So I don't know if I necessarily trust that 10 and 5 years number, especially with COVID being a thing. Regardless, having live service games also makes a lot of sense for PlayStation. And, regardless of whether they do the 10, having Destiny makes a lot of sense for PlayStation because of the rumors of Spartacus, right? Having a live service game is very important for a streaming service with a recurring subscription like Spartacus, because it's a thing that people will continue to play over and over again. If you put a single player game out on that, people will play it for a month and then potentially cancel their subscription. But if they're in on Destiny and they're getting all the free content for that and all the new expansions for free, then they'll stay in. And Destiny has that player base that will come to PlayStation to be able to play those new expansions for a cheaper price. So it makes a lot of sense. There's also, the side of why Bungie would want to join PlayStation, and that is, of course, because Bungie has been talking for a long time about wanting to turn Destiny into like a television show or a movie. And PlayStation, of course, is part and parcel with Sony Pictures. So this is definitely a plan that could work out for both parties. So I'm not saying that the deal is bad, just that the price is very high. Although I don't blame Jim Ryan for paying it whatsoever. Also, you'll notice that both television and live service games are going to become a good thing now that PlayStation is doing it. Just remember that I said that. And it's just really weird to me. So yes, I think this is a good deal. It's just really weird to me that they're deciding to keep it multi-platform. Because while that makes sense for Destiny, for sure, because it's a multiplayer game, it's an MMO, and it already exists. So it kind of falls under the same category as like Elder Scrolls Online or Fallout 76 or, any of those games that Xbox has acquired. It makes sense to keep them where their fan base already is, because you're just pulling money in off of them. And it's kind of strange to pull something that already exists out of a marketplace. But they specifically said that all future Bungie games would also be multi-platform. And I just can't understand why Jim Ryan would want to pay this high price tag and then change so little, right? He certainly has the money and the weight to throw around that he could have made those games exclusive if he wanted to. And I don't understand why, right? Because in my head, I want to think like Jim Ryan for sure would have wanted those games to be exclusive. He's a money man. He understands that having exclusives is important for a platform like PlayStation. So was it Bungie who made it part of the contract that the games would have to stay multi-platform? There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And one of the other big ones is that, is Bungie even going to stay with PlayStation? You look at Bungie and they are the Taylor Swift of the games industry. They were with Microsoft for a long time, and then they left to go make Destiny with Activision, and then a couple years later, they left Activision. So they have left 2 major publishers and are now very quickly afterwards signing with a third. So there is that question of whether or not they're even going to stay. Is Bungie still going to be a first-party PlayStation studio in 5 or 10 years? You know, it's very strange. It comes across as feeling extremely defensive, especially after the Activision Blizzard announcement. And of course, it's not defensive because this plan would have had to have taken months and months to put together, right? This was absolutely in the works before they ever knew that Activision Blizzard was going to be acquired. But it does come off feeling that way. And it's very, very odd to me. So this deal makes a lot of sense in a lot of different ways. It's just the price tag that I can't wrap my head around, right? I don't know. Some of that might be because I'm starving and exhausted, but it's just very confusing to me, the entire situation. So if you have some ideas about why this makes more sense than I do, please leave it in the comments down below. I would love to hear all of your thoughts about it. Do all the things that all the YouTubers tell you to do. Like, share, subscribe. I'm going to go eat and fall asleep because I need both of those things desperately. So until next time, I'll see you around.